excited to share with you today our experience at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona, enabling the strategy using Tableau, and I'm happy that you're here with us today. I'm Tracy Roth. I have over 18 years of experience in the healthcare analytics space, from the software side to the consulting side, and finally spending the last portion of my career to date at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona, leading the analytics and data science team there. My team leads the provider partnerships, population health, quality measurement, all different needs for the company from an analytic perspective. And of course, what comes along with that as well is the evaluation, the championing of effective tool sets within the organization, specifically Tableau. Justin?
My name is Justin Inkfoot. I am a data visualization consultant with Slalom Consulting. I've been using Tableau about 7-8 years now, and really starting to dive into the user experience, user interface aspects of Tableau, the color theory behind it. I've been working with Blue Cross Blue Shield for about 1.5 years at this point. Came on officially in July of last year. We've done some really remarkable things that we're really excited to share with you all today. This is my 4th conference with Tableau. It's definitely the best conference, and my first time speaking up here, so very excited to kind of share some of the insights and inspire some of you all in the healthcare analytics space.
Awesome. So today, we're going to go on a little bit of a journey, vacation, whatever you'd like to call it. We'll start with setting the stage so you can truly understand where we are, who we are, and where we are as an organization. Really the opportunity to affect change within the organization, the need for information, and the drive there. And then we'll transition into how we solutioned, what the solutioning looks like, what the tactics were to truly drive adoption throughout the organization. And then we'll circle back with some measurements to date, and of course we'll have time for discussion or questions as you have toward the end. So to get started, I wanted to share a quote with everyone that has resonated with me over the past year and a half. As we started to roll out Tableau and its capabilities throughout the organization, we were in the middle of a leadership meeting rolling out our very first prototype of truly what we could share with the organization. And it was the very first time that anybody in the organization at the leadership level had truly seen our information showcased in that way. And one of our medical directors, our chief medical officer at that time, asked for everybody in the room to give feedback. They wanted to hear what was the initial impression. And we went around the room, and it was interesting to hear, oh, this looks, it's daunting, lots of information. And we came to Dr. Asbury, who's one of our medical directors, and he just paused. And he said, this new capability for the organization is truly cosmic. That was the word that he used, because he had never seen anything like it. It transcended what we had in the past, and just the ease of use. And that was what he used to describe it. So that word has really resonated with our leadership, and with us as well, as we have entered what we call an era of growth for our organization. So when I talk about growth, we have growth in a lot of different areas. It's how we define it as a company, with 1.5 million covered lives in Arizona to date, and over 1,500 employees. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona is one of the not-for-profit organizations within the association. So all of the Blue Cross Blue Shield of plans are independent licensees of the association, and we are one of the not-for-profit organizations. So when we look at growth and we look at change, it's in a lot of different areas. It has to do with people, it has to do with our membership, entering different markets, it has to do with our competencies as an organization, the tools we have, the analytic techniques that we are executing on the whole organization, just a ton of change and a ton of growth from an organization perspective. So when we explore what it means to be healthy, so I am Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona Healthy is one of our newest slogans that we use in the market. What does healthy mean? It means a little bit different things to different people. For us, inspiring health is our mission. We want to inspire health across the entire state, whether it's our member or not. We want to help individuals throughout our state inspire and help them have a healthier existence. What that means is truly understanding the different needs throughout the state in the rural and the urban areas that we service, and truly getting to the social needs across the entire state. So meeting members where they are, what are the barriers throughout the state, how can we as an organization help to move the needle in this area. Understanding the care continuum, understanding what members are receiving, the right care at the right time. And sometimes that means there's not enough. So we need to help that. We need to help to grow networks in certain areas. But sometimes that means that there's too much care, overuse, misuse of care, and finding ways to help identify these things. But at the end of the day, accessibility for everyone. That includes member strategy. It also includes provider strategy. Those are not different to us. They're the same. We have the same goals, but the strategies and the techniques to get there can be both member and provider driven. So on the left, you'll see 5 different areas where we focused from a strategy perspective, affordable products. So making sure that truly healthcare is accessible for all within our state, but then understanding the needs of that population from a health perspective and a social perspective, so that's a member strategy perspective, and finally from a provider perspective, how can we help providers, give them information and partner with them, whether it's in value-based opportunities or just information sharing. So a lot of different strategy here, and how do we inform that? That's really what we had to tackle from an analytics team. Our team is no different than most of your organizations. We have reporting needs, we have analytic needs, and of course, blending and data science methods where there's great opportunity on that front. I like to refer to it in analytics as our toolbox. We have a lot of different tools available to us, Tableau being one of the most powerful from an operational perspective across our organization. So understanding kind of how do we leverage these different areas to really help that strategy. I put this next piece, don't call us coders. I say this often. That seems to just be the legacy. I will ask the coders for that information. Coding is just a skill set. It's what we use to answer a question and to lead a strategy. It's just part of our toolbox. Coding is just one skill that we have. Our true value as analytic professionals across that continuum is to be able to understand the information and understand the strategy and connect them together in an easily digestible way. I always speak to this as an art. It is a beautiful thing when it's executed well throughout an organization. And finally, really getting that information to everyone within the organization that needs it. Of course, the need for information is huge. It is greater than any team just about can provide, so balancing priorities while cultivating a team that has fun is a challenge in any organization, making sure that they are both balanced together to get the best product. So all of these things together, a changing strategy, really a growth vision for the company, really sets the stage for change for an organization. So how do we tackle that as an analytics organization? How can we do our part to ensure a successful deployment when we are faced with a lot of opportunities? A year and a half ago, we were really understaffed for the needs of the organization. So our team itself grew double in size over the past year and a half. What that means is that we have resources, but it also means that there's a learning curve. And we all understand what that means. There is knowledge to be gained about learning about what the data is. How can we use that information? Every organization is different with what data is available to you, how you use it, how do you structure it correctly and strategically, and finally, balancing all of that growth of team, growth of tools in changing with that surmounting need for information in an organization. So it's been an incredibly exciting time, looking for ways to solution quickly and help our organization grow. So these are a few ideas that came to mind. It was interesting. Several years ago, we purchased Tableau Server, and it sat vacant for that time period. So we had a resource that was well available to us and needed leadership to get that up and running and fully executing as a resource to our team. And of course, unparalleled requests for ad hoc reports and analytics, custom processes every time. The ask was a little bit different each time. So we had to kind of open up the code again, open up the process, and execute that. And at that point, we had limited self-service tools. So we would create those analyses and surface those, but instead of facilitating the business users and our customers internally to make that, to create that analysis on their own in a good way. So putting all these things together, we knew that Tableau would be an amazing solution that we could truly stand up as an organization and deliver our customers, which really are throughout the company, the medical staff, the Brighter Partnership staff, the finance team, the sales team, you name it. They all need information. So we'll talk a little bit more about the solutioning of what that looked like and the tactics that we put in place to ensure a more successful rollout to non-technical, non-data savvy individuals. Justin?
Thank you, Tracy. So, as Tracy just said, there was a lot of opportunity at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona when I joined. Small team, lack of resources, lack of leveraging Tableau Server, which if anybody in this room is in a purchasing position knows that that's not a small investment to make. And so to be sitting on an investment like that for several years was a huge opportunity missed. Previously, they were also sharing files on SharePoint, so it was really building Tableau dashboards, uploading them to SharePoint when they had Tableau Server at their disposal. So there wasn't a consistent way that people were going to get information and consume it. So there was a ton of opportunity there. One of the best things about coming in with a landscape like that was the opportunity to share knowledge and really make a drastic change in the organization. I think for all of you that are new to Tableau or have now become more experienced, you know the growth that you do along the way. Learning how to design dashboards better, learning how to focus in on use cases, and really building your dashboards with visualizations and colors that tell a really compelling story, so that way you can extract the insights really easily. So as you may imagine, some of that was not being done. We'll kind of jump into some examples to see some of the before and after, but there was just a little bit of lack of consistency for colors and layout, and so there were really things that we wanted to focus on. And so we focused on a meeting of the minds to really build this cosmic journey. We had to really collaborate and get on the same page. We really wanted to focus on changing the culture and making them very data-centric and using data to drive decisions. So we needed to kind of help them along with that maturity as well. We wanted to also focus on the design to really make the dashboards engaging and intuitive so that way people would be open to using a new system. You know, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona, the average tenure was like 15 to 20 years, so very significant tenure. So anytime you're going about changing a culture, you've got to really do it mindfully and with change management in mind. And lastly, we wanted to focus on that Tableau Server adoption to really drive just the general overall adoption. So, what do I mean by a meeting of the minds? So, as I said, there was a lot of legacy content being used at the organization. So we really wanted to focus in on purpose-driven use cases and building a dashboard that had a very focused use case and question in mind, and really ensure that we were answering all of those with the right visualizations and KPIs. And so we needed to kind of get everybody together, those that were really close with the data, those really close with the subject area, to kind of do a brain dump of their thoughts, but allow a little bit of that flexibility from the design perspective and the dashboarding to kind of come from my end. So it was a great way to get all of those requirements, what we really needed to know and analyze, out on the table, so that way the dashboards really answered those right questions. But then focusing on the dashboard aspect to make sure that it told that story. So in those initial meetings, Tracy probably got tired of me asking questions such as why and what, but we were really trying to drive home what that use case was. Why did you want to analyze these dimensions? What were you going to then do with it? Why were we going to do that? And so really trying to drive in that strategy. I think if anybody went to the Susan Cain keynote this morning, I read her book Quiet recently, and seeing her speak on it was really interesting, but driving home more of the listening aspect. And I think that's what I did a lot when I first joined, was not talk so much, but allow everybody in the room from the Blue Cross side to get out their thoughts and to, again, ask those questions. So having them be the key players driving those meetings, and me pretty much just taking my notes, inferring what was being said, and then translating that into a dashboard. So as I said, the organization was really new to Tableau, consuming data visualization in really a modern business intelligence format. And so we really needed to be purposeful with what we built, so that way it would allow the organization to come in and really get behind the Tableau journey and start to use those dashboards. And so the format that we found that worked really best was using these iterative design review meetings, where this was probably one of the first things that we set up after getting a lot of those use cases out. We were trying to kind of explain how data could really tell the story, and so we kind of chunked our way through it. At first, we talked through all those questions, really figured out what that use case was, what those dimensions and measures and trending and KPIs were going to be needed in order to tell the story, so that way the dashboard answered that original use case. And so we took that and we literally went back to our childhood roots of, we took pen to paper, and Tracy and I both started sketching a lot of different iterations of a dashboard or one visualization in the dashboard, and breaking these out with more trends and showing some of the possibilities for how the data could really tell the story. And so we then took those, obviously, those initial meetings, those initial sketches, and tried to translate them into actual visualizations and dashboards. And I think one of the best things that we did to, again, aid the organization in their analytics maturity was looking across a couple different versions of maybe the same visualization. We would kind of look at one dashboard that was maybe duplicated 2 or 3 times, that had different visualizations that were telling the same story, but maybe in a slightly different way. And so maybe we had a bar chart that was looking at providers and the overall number of members that were attributed to them. So we could kind of start to understand who some of those top providers were. But maybe the second iteration then started to add color to that. So maybe we overlaid the efficiency index or the quality of that provider to understand how they were treating those members. So again, you could still see which provider had the largest volume, but maybe we could also see this provider has a really high volume, but maybe a not so great efficiency. Or maybe we would take it a step further and build a scatter plot out of that, where you had number of providers on one axis and efficiency on another axis. And so talking through how each of those 3 visualizations told the story, but in a slightly different format, really helped introduce and start to have some maybe more advanced visualizations introduced to the dashboard. And so it was a very collaborative nature of, and you all know as well just how quickly you can iterate in Tableau. So there were definitely times in person where Tracy threw out an idea and 30 seconds later we had a whole nother visualization. And so getting all of those ideas on the table, getting all those players that were very close to the data and key with that subject area really helped then ensure that the dashboards that we were building met that use case. By meeting regularly, it then also ensured that the use case was being driven home and just established a really close point of contact between us to make sure that we were going in the right direction without having a week or two go by. And the dashboard that I built is nowhere near what Tracy wanted. So we took all that and really started to focus in on the design. I'm a very artistic person and a very analytical person, just like many of you in this room, I would probably imagine. And so the combination of Tableau and analyzing your data, but having a ton of different assets and tools at your disposal to customize your dashboard or the visualization in particular, allowed us to get really creative. And this is what we were really trying to do, is focus on the design to really drive adoption and to make people really engaged with the dashboards. As I kind of alluded to earlier, the reports that were being consumed and built were a little legacy. So they were very similar to maybe your Excel content, very tabular with a ton of drop-downs. So not really taking advantage of the interactive features of Tableau. And one of my personal favorites is just the data storytelling. Compared to other BI tools, Tableau far surpasses a lot of other competitors with that data storytelling of being able to have 4 or 5 visualizations on a dashboard, leveraging your dashboard actions and drill deeper and deeper and deeper into your questions. And so we really wanted to focus on that. We wanted to focus on the color to make sure everything was really intuitive and really consistent. We wanted to focus on the layout and how, as you heard Tracy said, they doubled the team in a year and a half, how we could make that really easy for everybody to use. And so we really wanted to focus in on those 4 items, in particular with the design. So we really wanted to make everything very interactive. We didn't want a ton of drop-down menus or any of the built-in filters by default. We really wanted to have the interactive capabilities, introduce the parameters, so no matter what So no matter what your persona was within the organization, you could get to the questions and the answers that were incredibly relevant to you. By doing this, it also kind of made it very exciting and engaging. If you're looking at an Excel report, I mean, maybe the use of color will make you interested in on a certain cell or a certain column or a certain row. But once the users started to see that they could click in the data and touch the data, it just kind of opened up a whole nother, maybe can of worms, but a ton of possibilities for the business. It opened up thousands of possibilities for filters and actions, which they didn't have previously. And I think that's part of why we got that cosmic review the first time that we demoed all the dashboards to the board of directors at Blue Cross. So we'll do some before and afters. So as I was saying, very tabular reporting. This is an example of a report that I found from talking to some people previously of just very tabular in nature. You've got some filters over on the right-hand side of the dashboard, but very drop-down, radio dial. You've got some color, maybe if you want to include the row banding in there. But really not a ton that was enticing people to interact with this dashboard. And so we came in and this isn't like a before and after of that report, but of functionality. This was one of the first dashboards that we came out with. We were trying to analyze the state of the providers of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona. Where were they at? Who were they attributed to? What were they providing to those members? And trying to understand the quality or the efficiency of certain episodes for certain demographics as well. To understand are there opportunities for improvement? If we wanted to compensate them appropriately based on the care that they provided, this opened up all of that information. And so you can see on the left, we've got these blue little squares, which actually replaced a lot of those filters. They were filter visualizations that allowed you to see total counts or total dollar amounts, but across all segments or subsegments, or any other slice of the data. And so the users could come in and select one of those little blue squares and filter the rest of the data to the right-hand side. But pretty much every other piece of information you see on this dashboard is also a filter as well. So the combination of the active providers on the left with maybe more of like the episodes that they were being provided, you could compare actual provider networks or individual providers on the far right-hand side of the dashboard. Up at the top of the dashboard, we have kind of like 4 KPIs to really assist in the use case that we were looking at here. And under those first 2, those bars as well were additional filters. So they were kind of giving some additional context to maybe the number of episodes, so that second KPI. You could kind of see a breakout of acute or chronic episodes and focus in on just those. So there's a ton of possibilities. And comparing one with the other, you can see how the user started to get really excited with the data. There are thousands of possibilities for filtering in, as I said, compared to that initial crosstab one. So we were really driving home that interactive, getting engaged with your data, but also no matter what your persona was, if you focus on just a certain demographic or a certain group of providers, you could get to that information because it was relevant to you. So we focused on the interactive piece. We really wanted to drive home the use of color. The next example that I'll share is really a funny one. But color is incredibly important. There's a lot of preconceived notions with colors. Different cultures across the world view colors differently as well. And so it's been really an interesting one to educate myself on, and I encourage you all to learn more about color as well. But also focusing in on color blindness is a really big one that people don't spend a ton of attention on, but it does impact a certain subset of the population. And so we wanted to develop the dashboards and come up with a color palette that was going to be really intuitive and easy to understand. Since we were focusing on rolling out something entirely new to the organization, we were really being mindful of that change and that transition. And so since we were starting out with a clean slate, there was a great opportunity to standardize the color palettes and the colors that we were using, so that way when users started to look at a new dashboard, it was really quick for them to understand what they were looking at. Yes, the data and the underlying subject area was maybe different. Maybe one was looking across networks and maybe one was looking at different types of episodes, but the colors used conveyed the same meaning. So users started to get really used to the color blue that we pulled from the Blue Cross Blue Shield logo to indicate a good value or something that was high, and contrasted that with a red or something that was more alarming or a lower volume, something that you really needed to be aware of. And so this made rolling out new content really easy. I don't even have the stat. In the year and a half we were together, I think we created over like 30, 40 dashboards. It was an absurd amount of content. And so focusing on these principles helped that adoption of that much content in such a short period of time. So this was, again, a previous example, and we're going to focus on the color blue. The color blue here, there's actually 4 meanings. One's a different hue, but this darkest blue indicated 2016 Q4 results. It indicated non-contracted doctors and I think non-chronic conditions as well. So the blue and the orange bars couldn't really be compared to one another because they were not telling you the same piece of information. So trying to use color very purposefully, this dashboard is a great example. The first visualization to the right of the map is another great example. So there's blue being used here, and we're looking at genders. But blue in this picture is assigned to the female gender, and green is assigned to the male gender. So kind of jumping back to those preconceived meanings, a lot of people typically associate blue with male, and pink or a red with the female gender. So this is a great example of how, one, that dark blue can't be read intuitively across the various visualizations, but then with that gender visualization, your preconceived notions and what you think blue may be telling you is actually the complete opposite. So focusing on color and really being mindful and purposeful of what you're using it for is super important. And so like the first example, you can see that same color palette used. You'll start to get a same feel for the layout of the dashboards, and I'll drive that home in depth later. But we've got the blues where it is something that's a little bit better. So we've got in the middle the providers, and you can see those that have, or provider groups, and those with a higher volume of providers. We've got efficiency index where there is a good and a bad side of the overall provider efficiency. So when they're on the negative side, we're using that red to really draw attention to somebody with a low efficiency or a low quality score. And so between dashboards, it's really easy to kind of get used to colors. We've introduced a second concept already in a matter of minutes, but the time to understand what you're looking at has already been reduced. And so comparing that before and after, where color was not used intuitively or where it has been at the bottom right, it allowed for that adoption of people to get really comfortable with the information really quickly. So we're going to focus on design and separate it out from the color aspects. They are very important, but here we're talking about the layout and the flow, the way that the information is really presented to the user. As we kind of saw in some of the before and after screenshots, a lot of the before ones, there was inconsistent with design and where certain elements were placed compared to the two after shots that we've already seen, where your high-level filters are on the left and it gets a little bit more detailed to the bottom right. So you can see this image here, we've got filters on the right-hand side. We've got a couple different drop-down options versus this one as well. We've got filters across the top. So it wasn't really consistent and intuitive for if you needed to look at a subset of your data, where did you really need to go? All of these things really helped make the dashboard easier to understand. So we focused in on those high-level filters always on that left-hand side of the dashboard, where you could filter in on maybe a specific gender at first, or maybe you wanted to see if they were an active member with Blue Cross Blue Shield, or if they had been covered previously. So we took those high-level ones, but also used a combination of more detailed drop-down filters and placed them in the same space as the respective visualization. So I've got two filters that I've highlighted here. One, that top visualization is groups of providers with the actual providers listed below it. So if you wanted to filter in on a group of providers, that top red square is going to impact the overall dashboard, but it's right next to the actual provider group visualization. Same with that bottom one. We're looking at providers in that visualization. The title above it indicates that you're looking at providers, and so that provider filter is right next to it as well. So it really helped just understanding where you needed to go. Another one that I don't actually have called out with boxes that we'll talk to is just the flow of the dashboard. It's been alluded to in previous sessions this week, but just designing dashboards with the flow and the way you read information in mind. So a lot of cultures, we read from left to right. Designing dashboards with that in mind is just going to be really intuitive for the end users. But also, if you think about a newspaper article or something in a magazine where you've got really high-level information up at the top, you've got a really exciting title kind of talking about a company's IPO on the stock market or some big merger, the Salesforce Tableau merger. So you see it right on the top what you're looking at. You got to read your way through that article to really understand the nuts and bolts of that merger or what the company brought to the market and why they're now on the stock exchange. So those concepts were really driven home in these dashboards here, where you've got your very high-level filters on the left, and they cascade to the right. I should say that way for you all. But also you've got those really nice KPIs at the top that cascade down as well. All of those different visualizations really help support the information that's up at the top. So you've got a nice top-down, left-right format, which is just going to be really natural for everybody based on how you all read today. The last one that we included that was a huge addition with that adoption and growth with Tableau was this little assumptions icon, which some people use today. If you don't use it today, I highly encourage you to think more of it. It's a great way to include additional information in your dashboards, where you're probably going to leverage like a shape visualization, pull in a custom icon of a question mark or something. And so the users can hover over it, and you put information in that tooltip. So we put information such as definitions. How is this metric computed? What information are we looking at? Are we looking at all providers? Are we looking at all members? What years are we looking at? When was this data refreshed? How often is it refreshed? All of those other pieces of information, so that way Tracy didn't get an email really late at night or just, hey, what is this really telling me? We were trying to transition the organization to self-service analytics, leveraging Tableau Server, publishing all this information up there, giving the users the ability to filter and slice however they wanted to get to the information that was relevant to them. And so we coupled it with this help icon to further aid them in that self-service analytics journey of giving them some background context over what they're looking at. And so lastly, we focus on reusable assets. This could be a whole nother presentation in and of itself, but because we spend so much time on design and ramping up the existing and the new employees at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona, we didn't want all of the effort into those dashboards to just go to waste. And so we tried to figure out, is there a way that we can take these existing dashboards and turn them into templates so that way any user could come in, download the dashboard template, and plug and play with their own visualizations. So they didn't have to do all that fine-tuned formatting, which I know we all love so much. We wanted to do some of that initial work for them. And so we created two different assets. The bottom right is an example of a template where we took an existing dashboard and stripped out the visualizations that were in each of the different containers and replaced them with text boxes, which you can kind of see a little blurb in the middle of those blank spaces. And it really just told the users that, hey, this is an object, replace it with a visualization, and delete me afterwards. But we took advantage of the containers. I'm a huge proponent of tile dashboards as opposed to floating dashboards. I've never built a floating dashboard, and I'm quite happy with that. But we took advantage of the distribute evenly features that's been introduced recently, so that way these templates, although they were standardized on design, could be customized slightly for your use case. So we've got 4 options of KPIs at the top, but if your use case only needed 2 or 3, you could delete 1 or 2 of those objects, and the rest of it would scale appropriately. So those, what used to be 4 KPI blocks, are now 2 KPI blocks that are very equally spaced. So it kind of took care of a lot of that then thinking and legwork that the developers may have to do, and did it for them. So this is just one template. That top left screenshot is a template homepage that we created. So we actually sat down with a couple people and talked about how they use Tableau. How do you deliver reports? What are some of the different use cases just around data visualization? And we ended up coming up with 9 different templates. So we took those 9 templates, and we also took it a step further and jumped into some of the marketing materials. So there were certain campaigns that were going on inside of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona. One of theirs being the Mobilize AZ campaign. We're trying to reduce diabetes, I should say diabetic mental health substance member mortality in the state of Arizona. And so they've got a very unique logo to that. So we took all those templates, played into the colors of their logo, and created another 9 templates for that business area. And so we ended up with 27 different templates that could be used, and really, they have been used, and it's been really, I was telling Tracy earlier this week, it's really exciting for me to see what the team has been building. That's what we should have included in here. It's exciting to see all of that hard work into the design of these templates actually being used, and you've seen those before screenshots, what the team is outputting now, and they are leveraging a lot of those principles that we've put in place, a lot of those visualization types, and they're leaps and bounds ahead of where they were a year and a half ago, which is really exciting. All right. So we took all that, it's a lot of work, a lot of time was put into templates and design, and we really wanted to start to drive home Tableau Server. So we published, obviously, everything to Tableau Server. The investment was made, it was sitting there waiting for dashboards to be published, so that's what we did. We spun up those official dev, test, prod environments, and it's allowed us to move into a very agile space for testing, which the organization was also undergoing that transition as well. So a lot of change and a lot of opportunity. So we were able to publish dashboards to a test space and now incorporate many individuals to that testing process to cut down on the time to move to production, get a bunch of different users with different use cases and thoughts and questions in mind, and have them play around with the data. One of the other things we created in the production environment was this analytics resources project, which all of those templates were published to. So it is now a centralized repository of anything Tableau related. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about centers of excellence, and I'm sure a lot of you have them in your organization. And this is kind of what we did with Tableau Server, was published all of that information into this analytics resources project. So all of those color palettes were also up on Tableau. All of those guidelines for font were up on the server. So it was your one-stop shop for anything Tableau related, whether you're trying to find a template or understand the design or simply consume data. All you had to do was go to the production Tableau server, and everything was there for you. And so this really helped drive adoption, but also it allowed us to measure adoption. There's been some pretty exciting stuff that's gone on, not just with the team and their maturity, but also the use of Tableau Server. Tracy's got more on that in a minute, so I'm not going to steal her thunder, but there's some remarkable things that have happened at the organization. So that may be a lot of noise. So kind of how does this actually look in action? So we've got an example for you of a dashboard that we put together pretty recently. It wasn't our first dashboard. It was more of one of our final dashboards, sad note. But from start to finish was maybe one business week. It was a pretty quick turnaround. And the perception of this dashboard has been huge. We were trying to focus in on transformational strategy and figure out if there's different parts of the state that different levels of care should be focused in on. And so we got everybody together in the room, got all the key players that were close to the subject area, close to the use case out, and bombarded me with information. And took all my notes, did very little talking, asked some questions, and we were able to start to formulate what we needed to look at. And so in that meeting, we were in the room an hour and a half or 2 hours maybe of just getting everything out onto the table. Where do we need to pull data from? What was in scope? And then how is this really going to be used, and how we wanted people to interact with the data. So we took our first stab at a little drawing where we took all of those key pieces of information where I knew that geography was really important. If anybody knows Arizona, you know that's not Arizona, but that's how I drew Arizona. But a very quick iterative process. I love my iPad, I use it for everything, and so it kind of allowed us to play with color in a really easy format as well, where we probably sketched this out in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes, was able to erase it really quickly, kind of iterate with the team based on what we were wanting, But we knew that we wanted the map to really be the big driver. We wanted people to focus in on certain counties or demographics first, and then filter to the right-hand side to see a breakout of several different metrics. I think we ended up coming out with 20 plus metrics. So there was a ton of information. Did that go off? All right, we'll see if they can get the TV back working. Maybe. Nobody knows. All right, so we had to focus in on the interactive pieces of the dashboard. So there were 20-something metrics. Obviously, you can't color 20 different metrics one time on a map. So what we had to do is start to introduce parameters, so allow further interactive capabilities. So we came up with maybe a composite score at first, and then allow the users to select a different metric, which would then highlight the map a little bit differently as well. We're going to figure this out because we iterated on this. That was probably like a Wednesday or Thursday, and by Friday we had a nice little first prototype of the dashboard. Are we live? Sweet. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So, yeah, go for it, Tracy.
Something else that was. Can you hear me? Keep going. Can you just touch on the risk-adjusted benchmarks? That was important, critical to us.
Okay. Yes. So there was no data source in those templates. That's why I say this could be a whole other presentation in and of itself. Keep an eye out for me next year. There were actually no data sources behind it. So it was pretty much, you could download this template, connect to SQL, and build your data source. If you had a data source already that you were working with in another environment, another workbook, you could copy it over. So in order to publish it, it was simply like a clipboard data source of just I think you might be getting just literally a copy and paste. So there was no data actually in the published workbook. I probably copied the word "the" and created a data source out of the word "the." So it was something that allowed me to build the templates without having any true data behind it, and it didn't then take up a large amount of storage. All right, go for it, Tracy.
Something else to keep in mind, this dashboard that you'll see had really focused on the data architecture behind it. It has to be so seamless and easy for the front-end user to use. But the data that sits behind this dashboard includes not only site-specific information, but it also includes relevant lines of business from a strategy perspective, but it includes the ability to do custom, on-the-fly, risk-adjusted comparisons to benchmarks for the user. So we had to architect the data in a way that regardless of what the user was looking at or playing with, the risk adjustment to the benchmarks in the comparisons that we were using as a conditional highlight would actually function correctly. So there's a whole lot. The front end's beautiful, and it was so well received, and that's what you want your user to feel, is, oh, this is so easy. My opportunity is right here. But we all know what sits behind there and how very strategic and from an art perspective, that data has to be architected in just the perfect way.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so this was our sketch. And so a day later, 2 days later, this was actually our output. And so you can see comparative to that sketch, it's almost identical. Kind of move some things around a little bit just to maximize real estate. But allowed the users to look at a slew of different metrics. You could count all those bubbles in there and figure out how many metrics there were. But one of the coolest things that we tried to do, it may be hard to see on that screen, it might pop up well. There's a yellow square behind one of those bubbles. And so we came up with this little highlighter component. So you could change the metric that was coloring the map to any of those bubbles. But we wanted to also kind of highlight and indicate which metric you were looking at. So that dot that's got that yellow square behind it is currently the metric that we're analyzing and coloring it on the map. So you could look at a bunch of different information. You could look at the actual benchmark. You could see if they were above or below it. You could understand the percentage difference between the benchmark. So there was a ton of different ways that we just presented this information itself. So that being said, I will pass it back over to Tracy to kind of talk through some of the metrics and what we've seen in the year and a half together.
Thank you. And of course, we, with such project and expectations of this caliber, we want to make sure we are clearly measuring success from a project perspective, and how to do that. Sometimes those measurements are very basic and general, and just basic. Okay, are users actually using the system? When are they using it? So how many users do we have over time? Are we increasing adoption throughout the organization? How many users by dashboard do we have? So that's something that I actually track from a team perspective. I want to make sure that if the work that's requested of our team is being used effectively throughout the organization. If for some reason that dashboard I see is not being used, I'll reach out to their leader as well and have ongoing dialogue. Did it not meet the need? Is this not something that's worthy of a dashboard? That's just something that has to be refreshed here and there. It's an ongoing dialogue throughout the organization to keep that open, but being able to track user activity on the server is critical to us. Also understanding when users are most active. This helps us plan for use and for availability of resources, and to understand when users are looking for information most often, what time of the day, what time during the week. So being able to visualize this and track it is critical for our organization as well. Some of these key metrics that we track as well, active users. When we started about a year and a half ago, we had 12. And just about all of those were in the analytics department. So these were the developers and the users of the information. Today we have 176, and those are trained users in the organization. As you all know, Tableau and analytics in general, it is not something that you can just set up and walk away from. It is a constant source of work and challenge to keep users trained, new users coming onto the group. Maybe there are new business questions and we have to adjust, or maybe there's a new strategy that we need to include in a dashboard. This is an ongoing iterative process, and those lines of dialogue with customers throughout the organization are critical to making sure that that is something that can be created as an ongoing value to the organization. Save time, Justin mentioned, we've set up easily over 30 dashboards for different reasons. In 4 of them alone, we've saved 1.1 FTE. And that is savings from ad hoc reporting and from custom requests of reports that have come in. And that doesn't mean that 1.1 FTE is not used. We can repurpose that. Instead of just being a reporting mechanism, to be able to be used for more analytic work and developing in partnership, and really using our tools effectively. So it's really a repurpose of FTE allocation into truly the work that as analysts we want to do. You really want to feel like you're valued, that what you're bringing to the table is truly being used by the organization in kind of iterating through reporting. At least from the feedback I've heard from my team, just kind of ongoing reporting gets old after a while. You want to do something fun and challenging and provide value. We're able to repurpose FTE for more analytic functions within our team just because of creating tools like that.